I'm making a video to help us get started on the first analysis, which is on Sweat, the play by Lynn Nottage. It was performed first in 2015, so it's still a fairly recent play. Remember, the play is set in Pennsylvania, and it's a bunch of characters who work at Olsted's factory, which in the time of the play gets shut down and all of the characters lose their jobs. So there's a lot of conflict and anger and grief throughout the play that the characters deal with. The first analysis is based only on Act 1, and if we take a look here, I've got on the screen the assignment, which I pasted into my document, and the assignment is a character's potential for change. Based on your reading of Lynn Nottage's play Sweat, analyze one character's role in Act 1 and consider future possible roles. What personally motivates the character? What relationships and interactions within the community influence their thoughts and actions? In what ways are their conflicts systemic and or rooted in personality? What might we see in further acts about this character, their social connections, hopes and fears, and what the character might learn or not in the play? How might you see that the character has changed or not as the play moves forward? Now, the purpose of this is partly to get to know the characters and to analyze them, but it's also to get prepared for thinking about writing our Act 3 to the two-act play, imagining what could happen with the characters in the future. So by thinking about what motivates one character and how they may or may not change in the future, we can start thinking about what we might do within Act 3 if there were one, if we were going to write one. So I've decided to choose one of the young men, and at first I wanted to do Chris, but I realized Jason's a little more difficult to do, so I thought that might be a good thing to try. Why not, right? Because writing an essay is an opportunity to try something. So I'm going to focus on Jason. In order to set up my argument, what I did is I first read through the entire play, and I watched also the performance of it from Utah that we've got linked in our resources. And then I took out all of the sections where we see Jason interacting with other characters. So I could look at just this character, how he interacts with other people, what he says, why he says what he says. And here's what I came up with. I actually did the two boys side by side because I couldn't decide which one to do. These are young men. They're like 18 as we learn. And both of their parents also worked in the factory. Jason is Tracy's son, and his father is not in the picture. And Chris is son to Cynthia and Brucey. Remember, Cynthia works in the factory and takes a promotion, but Brucey is the guy who has addiction issues and keeps asking Chris and Jason for money. When we first meet these young men, they are recently out of prison in the year 2008, and they are with their parole officer, Evan. Jason is has joined the Aryan Brotherhood in prison. He has tattoos on his face, which shows poor impulse control. You'd probably want tattoos in a less prominent spot. We see he has difficulty, in my opinion, he has difficulty expressing his feelings because when Evan asks him what he's been doing and what's going on, he really gives the minimal answers, like one word or I got a job, what else do you want? He has a job at a pretzel factory, which actually isn't a bad job. But when Evan asks him about how he's doing, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, is his response. Evan's hard on him. Now, partly, as Evan himself says, that's because he has Aryan Brotherhood tattoos on his face, i.e. he's joined a white supremacist group in prison. And, Evan's a black man, and this is not an appealing aspect to Jason's personality. But also he's not very forthcoming, whereas when we see Chris interacting with his same parole officer, Evan, he's a lot more forthcoming with his emotions and his feelings. So Jason has difficulty expressing feelings. I'm being really sympathetic here. I am looking a lot of, it says here, conflict systemic or rooted in personality. I think I tend to see a lot of conflict as more systemic or a result of relationships growing up and friendships and his mother. So I do tend to see things as mostly shaped by nurture rather than nature. So the Aryan Brotherhood, for example, is interesting because he's obviously been very close friends with Chris his whole life. And Chris is a black man. So what made him join the Aryan Brotherhood when he got into prison? There's the conflicts of prison, and B, we do see when we meet Jason in 2000 that he has some issues with race, which I would trace back to his mother, Tracy. Because even though Tracy is best friends with Cynthia, Chris's mother, she says some problematic things about Oscar, the Colombian young gentleman from Colombia who works in the bar. Like, I think she says he's Puerto Rican. He's not Puerto Rican, right? Well, Puerto Rico is part of the United States, and Colombia is a completely different country. But it's interesting because Tracy is friends with Cynthia, a black woman, until Cynthia gets the promotion. So I think Tracy is more casually racist, and that Jason probably grew up around that. Tracy seems to be making an exception for Cynthia, who's different, until she gets the promotion, at which point Tracy starts to have issues with her. Whereas I was looking at Jason's issues, and I think if I were going to come up with a thesis on Jason, it would be a lot more about being afraid to be left behind. Because we see that one interaction here, I've got pasted in here from Act 1, Scene 3, where Chris says he wants to become a teacher. And Jason reacts rather badly. Notice that Chris has not told Jason, even though they're best friends, that he applied for college because he knew that Jason would be dismissive of it. And when Chris says, I've got aspirations, Jason kind of scoffingly responds, you've got aspirations? What is this? Black History Month. And so that's where we see the racism come out, when he's afraid that Chris is going to move ahead in life and leave him behind. So it's expressed as in my opinion, racism. What is this Black History Month? Which is reminding Chris that he's black, and also scoffing at him and at Black History Month at the same time, making fun of his aspirations, hopes, and dreams. But also, I think he's afraid. He says, shit, I just kind of thought we'd retire and open a franchise together. We're a team. You can't leave. So he doesn't want Chris to go out and make a better life for himself. So on the one hand, he is close to Chris, but on the other hand, he's that kind of friend who's going to hold his buddy back because he's afraid he's not getting ahead in the world and his friends will leave him. When I look back, I also see that Jason tells us that when he was 21, his mother changed the locks. So as to tell him he's out, he's on his own, no more mom for you. So I think he fears being left behind by friends and family. I think his father's out of the picture. His mother has been harsh and perhaps not the most caring person. When we do see those two interacting, it's her asking Jason, her son, to buy her beers. Whereas when we see Chris interacting with his mother, Cynthia, we see him telling her she looks great and them both interacting quite positively. So I think Chris has had the more supportive and friendlier relationship with both his parents. We even see him interacting with Brucey, who's an addict and begging for money. But Chris is caring, and Brucey is also caring, even though he's also perhaps not your best bet for someone to rely on. But still, he's there. So I'm going to say that Jason is affected by the racism around him. He's affected by a fear of people leaving him and leaving him behind. He probably ends up in prison, and the whole thing is just too overwhelming for him. He has the difficulty expressing his feelings, which Evan responds to quite negatively. What I would hope for the future is that this character can start to see his own issues, can start to untangle some of his feelings of isolation and aloneness, and come to terms with that as a way to become a better family member and a better friend, because in the end, he's not a good friend. It is touching when the two run into each other after prison in 2008 that they hug. But we see afterwards, Jason felt uncomfortable, whereas Chris recognized there was a rush of emotion, although he was shocked at the white supremacist face tattoos. So that would be my analysis of Jason, or at least the beginnings of it, just as I think through the character. My next thing I would do is work with my thesis about this character being afraid of being left behind, and start to build that argument out using passages that show his relationship with his mother, the absence of his father, and the times when racism rears its head before in the year 2000 and after prison in the facial tattoos. I do hope the character manages to get rid of the tattoos, stay at the pretzel factory, and work things out with Chris. But we'll see what happens in Act 2. Okay, bye.